these senators who are making $175,000 a year, which I figured out yesterday is $85 an hour, want to prevent your average American, not an average American, but the lowest wage Americans from being able to make $10 an hour. I mean, but yet only one Republican was willing to vote to even open debate on the minimum wage. Why is this a winning issue for Republicans? Help me explain that. You're a former Republican.
Well, I'll
never let you forget it.
You won't. Who used to work for Rick Perry, as you usually announce. As you usually give me the intro. Just briefly, though. You look. I think Republicans. This isn't their constituency. The folks that make minimum wage are not folks that generally vote Republican. So that has a lot to do with it. And then I think part of it is you think about kind of the William F. Buckley, Milton Friedman school of conservative economic thinking that still, I think, lingers around the Republican Party, and they just generally believe that there shouldn't be any sort of interference or government regulation. A lot of these Republicans would like to see there be no minimum wage whatsoever. However, economically speaking, it's actually just wrong thinking. I mean, they can actually professors can actually prove that if you raise the minimum wage, it's essentially like a rising tide that lifts all boats. It generally helps the economy overall. And of course, with any change, there's always a little bit of short-term adjustment in terms of some short-term job loss. But over the long term, historically speaking, it's helped the economy when we've raised the minimum wage.
The last time we did this was in 2004 under President George W. Bush. And many of the same Republicans who were there then voted for it under George W. Bush.
Yes. Well,
same Republicans, and yet they're voting against it under President Obama. So there's something else at play here, too, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is a Democratic president, and we know this is a hyper-partisan Republican conference and Republican Party that we have today that have, from day one, 6 years ago, have set out to destroy this administration and prevent any success, for Democrats along the way. So I think that plays a huge role in this. But it's a serious problem. I mean, there are folks like looking at McDonald's is a great example. The Agenda Project, my friend Erica Payne from the Agenda Project, they just did kind of a mockumentary video involving Ronald McDonald as like a freewheeling executive denying his employees, an increase in minimum wage since they actively worked against it. And, the CEOs at McDonald's, they make something like 1,200 times what their minimum wage employees make, who were making like $15,000 a year.
Right.
Working full time.
Well, it's
criminal.
So the result of people keeping the minimum wage at $7.25 an hour is, as you just pointed out, they work in 40 hours a week, full 52 hours a year, 52 weeks a year, and they're making $15,350 or something like that. They are living it's below the poverty level.
They are living.
They're living in poverty.
And
working a full-time job and living in poverty, which is an outrage.
Well, we're just we're the most powerful, the most wealthy country in the history of civilization, and it's absurd that such a large percentage of our population still has to go through this, because the issue isn't, are poor people better off than they were 40 years ago? I'm sure they are. It's the gap, the growing, the rapidly increasing gap between the rich and the poor, which we know is terrible for the economy and prospects going forward for all of us.